I always knew I was the second best child in my family. It wasn't something my parents ever said directly, they didn't need to. Their actions spoke louder than any words could. My brother Mike was their golden child, their firstborn, their pride and joy. 2 years older than me, he could do no wrong in their eyes. I remember when we were kids, and he broke Mom's favorite vase while playing baseball in the house. Instead of scolding him, Mom just smiled and said, "Boys will be boys. At least you're practicing your swing, honey." But when I accidentally spilled juice on the carpet a week later, it was a different story entirely. "Irene, how could you be so careless?" Mom's voice still rings in my ears. "Go get the cleaning supplies right now. And you're grounded for the weekend." These double standards were the backdrop of my childhood. Mike would get C's in school, and our parents would say, "Well, he's just more focused on sports right now." But if I got an A- instead of an A+, they'd barely look up from their phones and mutter, "You could do better if you tried harder." The only person who saw me, really saw me, was my grandmother. She lived just a few blocks away, and her house became my sanctuary. Sure, she doted on Mike too, brought him cookies, went to all his games, the works. But unlike my parents, she noticed my achievements too. The pattern continued year after year. Mike's birthdays were grand affairs with bounce houses, dozens of friends, and elaborate cakes. My birthdays, well, half the time my parents forgot them entirely. I remember my 10th birthday, I sat at the breakfast table, waiting for someone to say something. Mom was busy helping Mike with his science project, and Dad was reading the newspaper. That evening, when I finally worked up the courage to remind them, Dad looked genuinely surprised. "Oh, right. Happy birthday, kiddo. We'll get you something next time we're at the mall." They never did. Only Grandma remembered. She'd always come over with a small gift and a homemade cupcake with a single candle. "Make a wish, my dear," she'd whisper, and for a moment, I felt like I mattered. I learned to live with it, to expect nothing and be surprised by even the smallest acknowledgement. I threw myself into my studies, joined every academic club I could find, and tried to build my own identity away from Mike's shadow. But at home, I might as well have been invisible. The day Grandma got sick, everything changed. I was 14, and Mike was 16. I spent every afternoon at the hospital with her, doing my homework in the uncomfortable chair beside her bed while she dozed. Mike visited too, but less frequently. He was busy with football practice, and our parents said that was important for his future. One evening, just a few days before she passed away, she called our whole family to her hospital room. Mom, Dad, Mike, and I gathered around her bed. Her voice was weak but determined as she looked directly at Dad. "Son," she said, gripping his hand, "I want you to promise me something about my inheritance." She paused to catch her breath. "Promise me you'll use it for both of their educations, Mike's and Irene's. Both of them need to go to college." Dad nodded solemnly. "Of course, Mom, I promise you, right here in front of everyone, that your inheritance will go to both Mike's and Irene's education." After Grandma's death, I threw myself into my studies with even more determination. Even though I knew about her inheritance and Dad's promise, I wasn't taking any chances. I wanted to prove that I deserved to go to college on my own merits. My report cards were filled with A's, but nobody at home ever asked to see them. I'd leave them on the kitchen counter, hoping someone would notice, but they'd end up buried under takeout menus and Mike's football schedules. The only person who would have proudly displayed them on her fridge was no longer there to do so. I joined the debate club, despite my hands shaking every time I had to speak in public. "Clear your throat less, Irene," my debate coach would say. "You have good arguments, let them hear them." Gradually, my voice grew stronger, though at home it remained as invisible as ever. I won first place in the state science fair with my project on renewable energy. The local newspaper even ran a small article about it. I left it on Dad's desk, but it disappeared under a stack of papers, unread. Meanwhile, Mike's every football game made it onto our family calendar, marked with bright red circles. Then came Mike's graduation. Suddenly, our normally quiet house transformed into party central. Mom spent weeks planning every detail, from the catering to the decorations. "We're so proud of you, son," Dad announced during the party, clinking his glass for attention. The backyard was packed with relatives, friends, and what seemed like half the neighborhood. "Not only has our boy graduated, but he's also heading to Preston University this fall." Mike sat there grinning, keys to his new car dangling from his fingers. I stood in the corner, holding a plate of cake I wasn't eating. "Thanks to Mom's inheritance," Dad continued, his voice thick with emotion, "we've been able to secure Mike's future at one of the best colleges in the country." She would have been so proud. The guests erupted in applause and congratulations. 2 months later, we drove Mike to Preston University, 6 states away. Mom and Dad helped him move into his dorm, took hundreds of pictures, and spent 2 extra days in town just to make sure he settled in okay. After that, our house became Mike's satellite campus. Mom and Dad called him every day, sometimes putting him on speaker so his voice would fill the kitchen during dinner. They drove up to visit him at least twice a month, always returning with stories about his classes, his friends, his football practice. Meanwhile, I continued my senior year, alone in my quiet room, studying for tests nobody would celebrate, winning competitions nobody would attend, preparing for a future I wasn't sure I'd be allowed to have. 2 years passed quickly, and I finished high school at the top of my class. Not that anyone at home noticed or cared. On graduation day, I put on my white dress and honor cords alone. My parents had left 3 days earlier for a much-needed vacation with Mike. "We'll bring you back a souvenir," Mom had said casually, as if missing my graduation was as trivial as missing a regular Tuesday dinner. I sat among my classmates during the ceremony, watching other parents beam and take photos. My friend Jenny's mom even took some pictures of me, saying, "Your parents will want to see these." I didn't have the heart to tell her they probably wouldn't. While my classmates celebrated with their families, I went home and started working on my college applications. I'd been preparing for this moment for months, carefully crafting essays, gathering recommendation letters, and documenting all my academic achievements. The acceptance letters started arriving a week later. Evergreen State University offered me a full scholarship with free dorm accommodation. Their letter praised my academic achievements and extracurricular activities. Then came the acceptance from Blackwood Private College. Their program was exactly what I wanted, though the tuition was steep, not as expensive as Mike's Preston University, but still substantial. I knew my parents still had my portion of Grandma's inheritance. I'd overheard them discussing money matters enough times to know it was there, waiting, just as Grandma had intended. So I waited for their return, the Blackwood acceptance letter safely tucked away in my desk drawer, the Evergreen offer hidden as my backup plan. They came back tanned and cheerful 2 weeks later. Mike had already headed back to Preston to hang with his brothers, as Dad proudly announced. I waited until after dinner, when they were relaxed and still sharing vacation stories. "I got accepted to Blackwood College," I said during a rare moment of silence. "Their business program is highly ranked." Mom glanced up briefly from her phone. "That's nice, dear." "I'd need to pay tuition," I continued, my heart beating faster. I was hoping we could use my portion of Grandma's inheritance. The silence that followed was different, heavier somehow. Dad set down his coffee mug, exchanging a look with Mom. "We don't have money for your college tuition," he said flatly. I felt my chest tighten. "But, Grandma's inheritance? She made you promise, in front of everyone, that it would go to both our educations." Mom had the decency to look slightly uncomfortable, but Dad just shrugged. "We spent that money on our vacation. The rest went to your brother, he needed it more." "It was an expensive trip," Mom added, as if that explained everything. "And Mike's tuition isn't getting any cheaper. He needs the extra support." I stared at my parents, trying to process what they'd just said. The room felt too small, too hot. "You promised her," I said, my voice shaking. "Grandma made you promise." "We were all there, you, Mom, Mike, me." She made you swear you'd use the money for both our educations. Dad took another sip of his coffee, not even looking at me. I just didn't want to upset my mother in her final days. We knew from the start we wouldn't be giving you any of that money. Something inside me snapped. 18 years of being invisible, of swallowing my words, of accepting their neglect, it all came rushing out at once. "You're liars," I shouted, standing up so quickly my chair fell backward. "You're nothing but liars who betrayed your own mother's dying wish. You spent my college money on a vacation. You gave it to Mike, who already had his share. You've been lying to everyone, to Grandma, to me, too. Get out." Dad's words cut through my tirade like ice. I thought I'd misheard. "What?" "You heard your father," Mom said, her voice cold. "Get out of this house. You're 18 now, an adult. If you're so independent that you can talk to us this way, you can take care of yourself." Before I could respond, Mom grabbed my arm and practically dragged me upstairs to my room. She yanked my old suitcase from under the bed and threw it at my feet. "Pack your things," she said, pulling open my drawers. "I want you out of here first thing tomorrow morning." I stood there, frozen, watching as she pulled out the suitcase's expandable handle. This was really happening. My own parents were throwing me out. "Mom," I started to say, but the look she gave me was one I'd never seen before, like I was a stranger who had invaded her home. That's when it hit me, they were strangers too. Maybe they always had been. The people I'd been trying to please all these years, hoping for their love and approval, didn't really exist. These were just two people who happened to share my DNA. I packed in silence. Clothes, books, my laptop, the few precious photos I had of Grandma. Mom stood in the doorway watching, arms crossed, as if making sure I wouldn't steal anything. As if there was anything in this house I wanted anymore. When my suitcase was full, I took out my phone and texted Jenny, "Can I come over? It's important." Her response was immediate, "Of course, doors open." I walked out without saying goodbye. Nobody tried to stop me. Jenny's parents had given her a small apartment for her 18th birthday, just a few blocks away. She was waiting at her door when I arrived, took one look at my face and my suitcase, and pulled me into a hug. That night, as we sat on her couch drinking hot chocolate, I made my decision. I would accept the offer from Evergreen State University. The full scholarship and free dorm would be my ticket to independence. But I needed money for books and living expenses, so I'd have to work first. That summer at Sunnyside Cafe taught me more than just how to make the perfect latte. Between taking orders and balancing trays, I learned what it meant to stand on my own feet. My tips went straight into a savings account, growing dollar by dollar, while my paychecks covered basic necessities. When fall came, I hugged Jenny goodbye and moved into my dorm at Evergreen State. My roommate Sarah took one look at my sparse belongings and offered to share her mini fridge. That simple kindness almost made me cry. I found a job at the college library, shelving books and manning the reference desk during evening shifts. Between classes, work, and studying, I barely had time to think about my former life. The library became my sanctuary, quiet, orderly, and predictable, everything my family life hadn't been. When relatives called, their questions were always strange and probing. Aunt Linda's voice would be full of barely concealed concern. "Do you have somewhere to sleep at night, dear?" Uncle Bob would ask, "Are you getting enough to eat?" I'd answer truthfully that I was fine, wondering what stories they'd been told about my life. Sometimes Jenny would start to tell me news about my family. "Hey, I heard your brother," but I'd cut her off immediately. "I don't want to know," I'd say, and she'd understand. The holidays could have been hard, but Jenny's family wouldn't hear of me spending them alone. That first Christmas at their house, I sat at their dining table, surrounded by warmth and genuine affection. Jenny's dad, Mr. Peterson, pulled me aside after dinner. "Irene," he said, his voice serious but kind, "I've been watching how hard you work. When you graduate, there'll be a place for you at Peterson Technologies if you want it." I accepted on the spot, tears threatening to spill over. Finally, someone was noticing my effort, my determination. Graduation came faster than I expected. I stood on stage, accepting my diploma with highest honors, scanning the crowd out of habit. Jenny and her parents were there, cheering loudly enough to drown out the crowd. I didn't look for any other familiar faces. My first day at Peterson Technologies, I walked in wearing a suit I'd bought with my library savings. Within 6 months, I was leading my own projects. By year 2, I had a team reporting to me. Mr. Peterson's faith in me proved well-founded. I threw myself into every challenge, worked longer hours than anyone else, and quickly gained a reputation for solving problems others couldn't crack. The promotions and raises followed naturally. Soon I was earning more than I'd ever dreamed possible during those days of counting tips at the cafe. I bought professional clothes, started taking yoga classes, went on vacation with Jenny to places I'd only seen in magazines. My birthdays became celebrations of achievement rather than reminders of neglect. Jenny would organize small gatherings, just close friends from work, good food, and genuine laughter. No forced family dynamics, no pretense, no pain. My 27th birthday was approaching, and I had a secret I'd been keeping even from Jenny. For the past 5 years, I'd been saving every extra penny, Christmas bonuses, performance rewards, even the money I would have spent on lunch by bringing sandwiches from home instead of buying from the cafe downstairs. Every dollar went into my special savings account, labeled simply Dream. The dream became reality 3 weeks before my birthday. I stood in an empty living room with high ceilings and huge windows, hardwood floors gleaming in the afternoon sun, and signed the papers that made it mine. My own apartment. Not rented, owned. "Congratulations," the realtor said, handing me the keys. "It's all yours." That evening, feeling a bit bold and maybe a little proud, I did something I rarely did. I posted on social media. Just me, standing in my empty but beautiful living room, keys dangling from my fingers, unable to contain my smile. The caption read, "Early birthday gift to myself. Dreams do come true when you work hard enough. New home, birthday gift, blessed." The likes and comments started pouring in immediately. Jenny's was first, of course, finally. "Can't wait for the housewarming party." My colleagues chimed in with their congratulations. Even some relatives I hadn't heard from in years liked the post and left comments like, "So proud of you," and "Happy early birthday." I was sitting at my desk at work a week later, reviewing quarterly reports, when my phone buzzed. The number wasn't saved in my contacts, but I recognized it instantly. My mother's voice came through the speaker, sweet as honey and just as sticky. "Irene, sweetheart. I saw your beautiful new apartment on Facebook. And I suddenly remembered your birthday is coming up." Suddenly remembered. After many years of forgetting. "It's wonderful to see you doing so well," she continued, her voice dripping with an enthusiasm I'd never heard directed at me before. "Your father and I have been thinking, we should celebrate your birthday properly this year. At home. We'll invite the whole family." I almost laughed out loud. Of course. Years of silence, and now that I had a fancy apartment, suddenly I was worth remembering? Worth celebrating? "We've missed you so much," she added, and I could almost see her practiced, concerned expression through the phone. "It's time for the family to come together again. What do you say?" I should have said no. Should have told her exactly what I thought about her sudden attack of maternal affection. Instead, I heard myself saying, "Sure, Mom, why not?" As I hung up the phone, I couldn't help but smile, though there was no warmth in it. After all these years, I was curious to see what game they were playing. I pulled up to my parents' house in my new Mercedes, the engine purring softly as I parked. The contrast between my car and the house was stark, peeling paint, missing shingles, and overgrown lawn. My parents appeared in the doorway before I even reached it. Their eyes locked onto my car first, then shifted to my designer suit and heels. I watched their expressions change, noticed the calculating gleam in their eyes. "Irene," Mom rushed forward to hug me, her enthusiasm almost making me step back. "You look expensive." Dad hung back, trying and failing to look casual. They both seemed older than I remembered, more gray hair, deeper wrinkles, shoulders slightly stooped. The inside of the house was worse than the outside. The furniture I remembered from my childhood was worn and faded, the carpets threadbare. And there, sprawled on the couch like he'd never left, was Mike. He'd gained weight, lost hair, and sat beside a young woman whose pregnant belly strained against her dress. "Hey, sis," he said, not bothering to get up. "Meet Sarah, my wife." Mom quickly jumped in with explanations I hadn't asked for. "Mike's staying with us temporarily. Well, college wasn't quite the right fit. But he's got some promising job prospects." Going on 9 years of temporary, I thought, but kept my face neutral. "The guests will be here soon," Dad said, gesturing to a table laden with food. "But first, tell us about your job. That's quite a car you're driving. Must be making good money, huh?" "Things are fine," I replied, smoothly sidestepping the question. "The catering looks nice." "But what exactly do you do?" Mom pressed. "That apartment of yours must cost a fortune." "And a Mercedes." I smiled blandly. "I work in management. How's everyone been?" Before they could probe further, the doorbell rang. Suddenly the house was full of relatives, aunts, uncles, cousins I hadn't seen in nearly a decade. They swarmed around me with hugs and exclamations. Aunt Helen pulled me aside during the commotion, her voice low. "I'm so glad you finally came to your senses, dear. Your parents have been so worried. It must have been hard, living like that." I turned to her, confused. "Like what?" She glanced around before whispering, "You know, after you ran away with that boy. Living on the streets, refusing to work." She patted my arm. "But look at you now. All cleaned up and respectable again." The pieces clicked into place. While I'd been building my career, earning promotions, and buying my apartment, my parents had been spinning tales about their shameful runaway daughter. Their version of events painted them as the worried, abandoned parents of a wayward child. And I'd played right into their hands by cutting off contact with the extended family. Once everyone was seated at the table, Dad stood up, raising his glass. "We're here today to celebrate our wonderful daughter," he announced, his voice thick with fake emotion. "We're so proud of what she's become." Mom dabbed at her eyes with a napkin, tears I'd seen her practice for school plays decades ago. "The family should stick together," she said, reaching for my hand across the table. I kept mine firmly in my lap. That's what matters most, family supporting each other. The emphasis on supporting wasn't subtle. Neither was the way her eyes darted to my designer watch, my expensive jewelry. "Your father and I," she continued, sniffling, "we always knew you'd make something of yourself." I let the silence stretch for a moment after she finished. Then I stood up slowly, smoothing my dress. "Thank you all for coming," I said, my voice clear and steady. "It's interesting, actually, that my parents remembered my birthday this year. It's a first, really." The room grew quiet. Mom's fake tears dried up instantly. "You know, growing up, they never celebrated my birthdays. Not one. But I suppose an apartment in the nice part of town and a Mercedes make birthdays more memorable, don't they?" "Irene," Dad warned, "this isn't the time." "Oh, but it is." I turned to address the whole table. "Aunt Helen told me something interesting earlier. Apparently, I ran away from home at 18 with some boy. Became homeless? Refused to work?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I'd love to hear more about this mysterious bad boy I supposedly ran away with." Mom jumped in, her voice high and nervous. "Sweetheart, the past is the past. Let's not." "The truth," I said, raising my voice over hers, "is that they kicked me out. The day after my high school graduation." "Want to know why?" Mike shifted uncomfortably in his seat. A few relatives nodded. "Because I reminded them of the promise they made to our grandmother on her deathbed, that they'd use her inheritance for both Mike's and my college education." "Remember that promise, Dad?" You made it in front of everyone. But instead, they spent my portion on a luxury vacation and gave the rest to Mike. Then they threw me out when I dared to question them about it. That's not true, Mom protested weakly, but I could see the recognition in the relatives' eyes. I got into college on my own merits. Worked my way through it. Built my career from nothing. And in 9 years, they never once called. Never once remembered my birthday. Until they saw my new apartment on Facebook. The silence in the room was deafening. Aunt Helen was looking at my parents with undisguised disgust. Uncle Bob was shaking his head slowly. I'm sorry for disrupting this lovely party, I said, picking up my purse. But I thought you all deserved to know the truth. I didn't come back for a reconciliation. I came back to set the record straight. The drive home felt liberating. In my apartment, everything was ready, a catered dinner I'd arranged days ago, knowing exactly how this evening would end. Jenny arrived first, followed by my colleagues and true friends. We ate, drank, and celebrated, not just my birthday, but my freedom from the lies. The messages started coming that night, Mom begging me to reconsider, Dad saying they were wrong, Mike asking for help with his temporary situation. I blocked their numbers one by one.
I'm planning a trip with your grandparents, I said. What about you? Do you have any plans? I called my son Anthony after my in-laws invited us on a vacation. I have practice, so you all should go and have fun. But isn't this trip a bit out of the ordinary? Are you okay, Mom? I'll manage. I'll bring you back a souvenir. Work hard at your practice. Ensign, under my influence, has always been into marathon running. He even got into college on a running scholarship. He studies at a nearby university but stays in the dorms to save commuting time, coming home only during long holidays. I knew he couldn't join the trip, but I thought I should at least ask him. His response was exactly what I anticipated. My name is Flora, a 46-year-old working woman. My husband, Steve, is 4 years older and was once my boss. He's competent, and I respect him. After our marriage and the birth of our son, we built a happy family. Yet somewhere along the way, our relationship began to break down. The root cause, my husband's parents, especially his mother, who had a problem with me from the moment we married and has been bullying me ever since. Initially, Steve stood up for me, and because we lived far away from his parents, we seldom met them and managed to get by. But when our son, who loves marathoning, wanted to attend a high school near my in-laws, things changed. The reason he got into running was me. I used to run marathons and still do occasionally. It made me happy to see him take an interest in running just like me, so I convinced Steve to move closer to the high school my son wanted to attend. Steve applied for a transfer at work for our son's sake, and we moved. My son was recommended for his university from this high school, so I think it worked out well. Go get the rental car tomorrow morning and pick up my parents on your way back, Steve said the day before our trip. This left me confused. Huh? Why am I the one renting the car? What are you going to do? I'm tired from work, so I'll sleep until the last minute. Once you pick up my parents, come back, and I'll take over from there. It's in the same direction as our destination anyway. I could understand what he was saying, but if anything, I was more exhausted. Despite working similar hours, I was the one taking care of all the housework. When I think about it, we used to split the household chores equally. However, ever since we moved closer to his parents, they've been visiting us frequently. When his mother saw Steve doing housework, she vehemently opposed it. Housework is the wife's job. It's not something the breadwinner should do. Isn't that right, Flora? Overwhelmed by her intensity, I initially nodded in agreement. This continued until Steve eventually stopped doing anything around the house. It was partly Steve's fault, but I believe the main cause was his mother. Moreover, Steve started to echo his mother's sentiment, saying, I am the breadwinner, every now and then. By that time, it was too late for me to correct the situation, and I didn't even feel like trying anymore. Steve changed drastically over the past few years. His work performance seemed to have declined, and he frequently vented his frustrations on me. However, I realized that arguing back was more trouble than it was worth, so I decided to simply accept things as they are. That's the least stressful way for me to live. There were times I considered getting a divorce, but when it came time for our son's college recommendation, I feared it could disadvantage him if we were a single-parent family, so I couldn't go through with the divorce. Instead, I tricked my mind into believing I was taking care of a dog, not a person, and surprisingly, it did relieve some of my stress. So I began to feel like it wasn't worth expending my energy on getting a divorce, and that's how I've arrived at where I am today. The reason I agreed to join this trip was because it was to a resort that I absolutely love. I knew I could thoroughly enjoy myself even if I ended up doing things alone. Heck, I was even ready to do things separately from my in-laws and husband. Perhaps I was invited mainly because they needed someone to share the driving, but both my husband and my father-in-law can drive, so it'll work out one way or another. Anyway, I played along with the notion that our pampered pooch was being demanding again, went to get the rental car as my husband instructed, and headed to my in-laws' place. "Flora, you're late. Is that the car for today? You should have rented a bigger one." "Well, it's better than your tiny car at least. The car we usually use is the one I bought since I drive to work. I assumed I would be the primary user and I pay for it myself. We don't go out of town often, so I thought a small car would be just fine. I loved its interior design and color, so I bought it. Yet my husband would take it without asking and even let his parents ride in it. My in-laws complained about the car being small and looked down on me as if I could only afford a small car. I thought they could just use my father-in-law's car for the trip. However, he didn't like others driving his car and didn't want to drive it himself for the entire trip, so we ended up renting a car. Even so, I wasn't consulted about any of this. I just found out that I would be the one to pick up the rental car and drive it, with them in the back seat the whole time. It made me want to tell them to drive themselves. In a word, they are tiresome. In the end, my husband, who had said he would take turns driving, slept the entire time. My father-in-law didn't want to drive unless it was his own car, so I ended up driving all the way to our destination. With my husband asleep, my father-in-law kept criticizing my driving. He would say things like, "You could have turned left there, even though an oncoming car was obviously approaching, or why didn't you go, even though the light was turning red?" It was nothing but unnecessary stress. My mother-in-law joined in, saying, "Flora, your driving is as bad as ever." I didn't want to be criticized by a woman who can't even drive. At least I'm better than my father-in-law, who, as far as I know, has crashed his car at least 5 times. Despite being told he should surrender his license before causing a major accident, my mother-in-law kept insisting it was just bad luck and that he is a good driver. Well, I didn't want to ride in a car driven by my father-in-law anyway. I don't mind driving, but I'd appreciate it if they could stop interfering all the time. Upon reaching our destination, my husband finally woke up. Since we had been in the car all day and were tired, we followed my in-laws' wish to spend the day relaxing in the hotel, so we didn't go out. I enjoyed myself by swimming in the pool and exploring the hotel. It was a fulfilling time. After having dinner and going to the spa, I returned to find my husband already asleep. I didn't know what my in-laws were doing in the next room, but they were probably asleep too. I had a beer in the room before crawling into bed. I woke up in the fresh morning air. My husband was still asleep, and with some time until breakfast, I decided to take a morning stroll. But when I came back, the unthinkable had happened. Upon entering the room, my husband was nowhere to be found. Shocked, I scanned the room. His luggage was also missing. I stepped out and rang the doorbell to my in-laws' room next door, but there was no answer. When I went to the front desk to inquire, I was told my husband and in-laws had already finished breakfast. Though they had told me breakfast was at 8:30, it seems they actually reserved it an hour earlier, exactly when I had gone for my walk. On top of that, I was left to check out. Did that mean my mother-in-law's offer to pay for our stay was a lie? With no other option, I paid for both rooms and left the hotel. Of course, there was no car. As I was pondering what to do next, my cell phone rang. It was my mother-in-law. "Where are you now?" When I asked that, my mother-in-law started laughing. "We're having quality time as a family since we're on vacation." "Oh, is that so? Well then, why didn't you just come as 3 from the start instead of leaving me behind?" "Well, you wanted to come here, didn't you, Flora? That's why we brought you along." I remembered mentioning how I wanted to visit this resort a while back, while watching TV with my husband. Is that what he remembered? Usually it would be nice if he remembered what I casually said, but this time it was used just to annoy me. Moreover, I was the one who did most of the driving to get here. Why do I have to hear that I was brought here by my mother-in-law, who never drove nor paid? I was past the point of anger and could only sigh. All right then, we'll go sightseeing as a family and head home first. You do some sightseeing too, Flora, and come back. We don't know how you'll get back, but you're good at marathons, aren't you? Just run back, my mother-in-law mocked. At her laughter, my anger exploded. Is Steve driving? Put me on speakerphone so he can hear me. When I said that, it seemed my mother-in-law switched over, and I could hear my husband's voice. Good morning. You wanted to come here, didn't you? Take it easy today, but remember there's laundry from the trip to be done. Make sure you wash it by tomorrow morning. He sounded cheerful. I had no more feelings for him. Do your own laundry. Hey, that's no way to talk. I'm the breadwinner, and telling you to take it easy today. You should be saying thank you. Oh right, the breadwinner. But don't worry, this is the last time we'll see each other. Well, all you've really seen of me is me sleeping. What do you mean? We need to come home today. There's laundry and house cleaning to be done. Yeah, that's why I'm not going back. What are you talking about? His voice was shaken. I'm getting a divorce. You told me half a year ago, didn't you, that you met your soulmate, your childhood friend, and you were going to marry her? You reunited when she moved back to your hometown, right? The childhood friend who had divorced. Remember you showed me the divorce papers? About 6 months ago, I confronted my husband because something felt off, and he came clean. He had met his childhood friend and decided she was his soulmate. He wanted to divorce me and remarry her. She had a middle school-aged child and was struggling as a single mother, and he wanted to support her. So he asked me for a divorce. Truthfully, I had lost my feelings for my husband, but I wasn't quite ready to say, okay, let's get a divorce. He gave me the pre-filled divorce papers, but I didn't agree to divorce. We didn't speak for a few days after that, but when I stopped doing the household chores, he was in a bind. A few days later, he said, forget about what I said before. Well, I couldn't just forget it, and I started gathering evidence of his infidelity. Could it be that Steve planned this trick to get on my good side? I mused. The conversation happened about 3 months ago. It was right after you quit your job, I said. Surprised voices from my in-laws on the other end of the speakerphone echoed. This must have been the first time they heard about their son quitting his job. When you said you were quitting your job, I told you it would be hard to get a new job, and I disagreed with your reason, right? I recalled you said that you were an excellent worker and would find a new job right away, but you only found a part-time job. I wonder when you'll find a proper job. My husband was driving and staying quiet, so I took the opportunity to spill everything. I've been coping with stress by imagining you as a dog, but then I thought I might as well get an actual dog, I declared. So I'll submit the divorce papers. Enjoy your family vacation. My in-laws were calling my name in shock, and my husband was trying to say something, but I cut the call without paying any attention. I decided to enjoy sightseeing before heading home. When I explained the situation over the phone to my son, he said, I told you. Well, if you're divorcing, that's fine, Anson said. His reaction was lighter than I expected, given he knew the situation. After returning from the trip, I didn't go home. I had been keeping my Anson's belongings in a self-storage unit, ready for any situation. With only the bare necessities with me, I dragged my suitcase to a real estate agency. The sales representative, a woman of my generation and someone I'd had drinks with a few times, greeted me. Over those drinks, I'd often complained about my husband and in-laws and asked her to always keep an eye on available properties just in case. That day, I signed a contract for my own place. Feeling relieved, I decided to submit the divorce papers at City Hall. The divorce was granted without any issue. Finally, I returned the countless calls my husband had made. Hello, I started. The divorce papers have been accepted. We are now officially strangers. My husband's panicked voice echoed through the phone. Are you serious about the divorce? I broke up with her. Now, there's only you. You didn't like me looking at other women, right? Now I'm only looking at you, so come back without worries. But all I felt for his words was revulsion. What are you talking about? I never intended to please you in the first place. And you didn't break up with her, did you? You were dumped because you couldn't find a job and had no money, right? It turned out that my husband's mistress was a friend of the sales rep who had introduced us to her new place. Talk about a small world. She had been listening to complaints about my husband from the mistress who claimed to be his current girlfriend. Apparently, after he quit his job and started working part-time, she saw no point in being with him and broke up. But a fling is a fling. I'm definitely going to demand compensation. Compensation? I told you, we broke up. Now there's only you. I could only sigh at this point. So you're saying that now that you're single, you're thinking of having another affair? I don't care what you do, but I'm done being exploited. You didn't even notice that your stuff at home was missing because you didn't care, did you? I'm not going back, so throw away what you don't need. With that, I hung up the phone. Even after that, my ex-husband kept calling me, and even my former in-laws reached out. But of course, I'm never going back to that house. My ex-husband still hasn't found a job, can't pay the rent, and has moved back in with his parents. My ex-father-in-law is still driving dangerously and recently crashed into a neighbor's fence with my ex-mother-in-law in the car. Fortunately, no one else was injured, but they didn't have property insurance and had to borrow money to cover the repair costs. All of this was written in emails that my ex-husband kept sending me on his own. I find his misfortune slightly amusing. I don't reply, but I haven't blocked his emails either, just quietly enjoying the show. Since I moved to a pet-friendly property, I started keeping a small dog and realized that I enjoy taking care of a dog more than taking care of people. My son, worried about me being alone, has started coming over on weekends, a change from his previous habit of only visiting on long holidays. I'm living a fulfilling life every day. Maybe this weekend, I'll go back to that resort town for the first time in a while. Help me, brother, I cried as I stumbled into my brother's place in the middle of a freezing winter night, wearing ragged clothes and holding the baby in my arms. My brother was speechless at the sight of me, so changed and frail, clad only in a tattered shirt and barefoot. What on earth happened? He quickly asked, ushering me into the house and warming up the room. The baby, wrapped in my jacket, was sound asleep, but I couldn't stop shivering. Who did this to my precious little sister? My brother muttered through clenched teeth. Lily, it's going to be okay now. Upon hearing my brother's gentle voice, I felt a wave of relief wash over me as if all the strength had drained from my body. My name is Lily, a 27-year-old homemaker with a young son. I was once a nurse until Terry, the son of the hospital director, proposed to me. Terry was kind and efficient in his work, which initially attracted me to him. I have a brother who is 5 years older than me, and after our parents' tragic death in a car accident when I was 4 and he was in 3rd grade, he became my protector. Our parents died when their car was hit head-on by a truck whose driver had fallen asleep at the wheel. My mother, also a nurse, was working late, and it happened when my father went to pick her up. Before leaving to pick her up, my father had casually told my brother, Derek, I'm counting on you to take care of Lily. These words became unforgettable for my brother, who took them to heart and has protected me ever since. We never fought. He has always been like a superhero to me. After the accident, it seemed my brother and I would be sent to separate foster homes. However, our paternal grandparents, who we hadn't interacted much with until then, took us in. When I first met our grandfather, his white hair and bushy beard made him look like a storybook Santa Claus. Seeing Derek, he muttered, You're the spitting image of your father, and I believe I saw tears in his eyes. Our grandmother was a kind woman who hugged me tightly and sobbed, Poor child. Later, I learned that our father had fallen out with our grandfather, leaving home in what amounted to running away. Our grandfather wanted him to continue the family business, but our father wanted his freedom. Neither would yield, and they ended up parting on bad terms. Derek and I moved to our grandparents' house nestled in the rural mountains. Our grandfather, a renowned potter, created works so famous that a single teacup could sell for thousands of dollars. Thanks to this, Derek and I grew up without financial difficulties. Our grandfather was stubborn, hated dishonesty, and dedicated himself completely to his work, while our grandmother was incredibly kind. Despite our parents no longer being with us, under our grandparents' watchful eyes, we grew up happily. Derek attended a prestigious university in the city, and I went to nursing school. We both had the chance to follow our dreams. However, when our grandmother's health deteriorated, Derek returned home from the city. I wanted to return too, but as I was still a student, Derek advised against it. Derek had always been interested in our grandfather's work but was firmly told to follow his own path, leading him to university. I think our grandfather regretted forcing our deceased father to continue the family business and didn't want his grandchildren to go through the same thing. However, Derek insisted on being taught pottery by our grandfather. He had always been handy, making pottery a good fit for him. Besides, Derek excelled at everything, academics, sports, and he was popular among his friends. He was truly a superhero, taking care of our sick grandmother while mastering the art of pottery. While learning the trade from our grandfather, I graduated from nursing school and started working as a nurse. That's when Terry proposed and we got married. We had a grand wedding, and what I remember most are the joyous smiles of Derek and our grandfather. Derek brought pictures of our parents to the wedding. "We all just want you to be happy, Lily, including Mom and Dad," he said, shedding tears openly. Our grandmother, too ill to attend, cried tears of joy when she saw the video of the ceremony. I felt truly blessed with a great family. I quit my job as a nurse, moved into my husband Terry's family home, and began to support him as a full-time homemaker. We had a child, and Terry was kind. Our life seemed smooth sailing, and I couldn't have imagined the hellish days that were to come. Not long after my grandmother passed away, Terry attended the funeral with me and comforted me. My grandfather's disappointment was so severe that I couldn't even speak to him. Derek, while supporting our grandfather, immersed himself more and more into his pottery. 6 months passed. "Help me, brother," I cried as I fled to my brother's place in the middle of a freezing winter night, wearing ragged clothes and holding a baby in my arms. Derek was at a loss for words upon seeing my drastically changed appearance. I was so skinny and weak, just wearing a thin, tattered shirt and barefoot. What on earth happened? He quickly let me in and warmed up the room. The baby wrapped in my coat was sound asleep, but I couldn't stop shivering. "Who did this to my dear sister?" Derek murmured through clenched teeth. I felt a wave of relief wash over me as if all strength had left my body. I didn't want to worry Derek or our grandfather, but I had no choice but to tell them. I began to recount the events at my in-laws' house. Terry and I had been living together, but due to my in-laws' concern that I should rest during and after pregnancy, we moved into their house. My in-laws, both remarried, seemed like a genuinely close family. Terry was the stepson of my mother-in-law. I was happy that my child and I could become part of this family. My father-in-law was kind to me, telling me to make myself at home. Having no father, his kindness was precious to me. However, my mother-in-law seemed not to like this. "You're flirting with my husband, aren't you, you disgusting woman?" she began to say. She started harassing me when my father-in-law was not around. "You're an uneducated child with no parents," she said, not just verbally abusing me but also causing physical harm. She spilled boiling water towards me, planted pins in my meals, and even tried to push me down the stairs. It was life-threatening. My mother-in-law's family had a long-standing reputation in the retail business, managing a major department store chain run by her brother. "Your background is miles apart from mine. You can't blend with someone who grew up in poverty," she said, looking down on me. Then, a situation arose that added to my troubles. With a shortage of staff at the hospital, a former nurse was often called in to help, working alongside my husband Terry. During this time, I noticed something unsettling. Terry, being the son of the hospital director, was often seen reprimanding the nurses unreasonably. "Move quicker. You're a nurse getting paid, aren't you? Don't slack off just because my father is lenient. Once I take over this hospital, I won't be so forgiving. How many times do I have to tell you? Order the supplies in advance. They're not cheap, you know. Don't take running a hospital lightly." Such unreasonable remarks were directed at nurses who were working hard for the patients. "Terry, don't you think that's too harsh? Everyone here is trying their best," I interjected. He didn't take kindly to this. Furious that I had stood up to him, he flew off the handle in front of the other nurses. Since then, Terry became distant towards me. It might have also been influenced by my mother-in-law, who had been telling Terry from the start, "You're too soft on your wife. She's taking you for granted." While my father-in-law was still well, Terry couldn't be openly hostile or abusive in front of him. But then my father-in-law fell seriously ill and became bedridden. When it rains, it pours. My mother-in-law seized the opportunity and made me take care of all the chores, treating me like a housekeeper. I was extremely busy carrying my son on my back, cooking, doing laundry, and cleaning. Even in front of my father-in-law, my mother-in-law began to mistreat me, but my weakened father-in-law was unable to stop her. "Please don't speak to Lily that way," he would say. "Here you go again defending that woman, and you can't even do anything with your frail body. Oh, how I wish you were gone," she would retort, spewing venom at my sick father-in-law. I endured it for the sake of my son and father-in-law. The harassment escalated. "Housekeepers don't eat with the family. Eat the leftovers later, she told me. I was so upset that I lost my appetite. When I looked in the mirror, I was shocked to see my gaunt and ragged reflection. My husband said, I only married you because you were a bit attractive, but I never thought you'd become such a shabby woman. I'm too embarrassed to be seen with you. He told me to move from our bedroom to the storeroom. How cruel can people be? My husband and mother-in-law began to verbally abuse even my son. Of course he's not smart. Look at who his mother is, my mother-in-law would say. His constant crying is annoying. Make him stop right now, my husband would demand. It felt as if something inside me had snapped. I had made up my mind to run away. My only concern was my father-in-law. If I didn't take care of him, he would be in trouble. However, my father-in-law said, Don't worry about me, Lily. You should escape to your brother's place. He pulled out several $100 bills from under his pillow and pressed them into my hand. I decided to flee on the spot in the clothes I was wearing. I wrapped my son in my coat to keep him warm, rushed outside, hailed a taxi with the money my father-in-law had given me, and headed to my grandfather's house. I poured out the whole story to my grandfather and my brother Derek all at once. Derek, making a furious face I had never seen before, was shaking his clenched fist. Derek reassured me, saying, You've had it tough, haven't you? It's okay now, relax. I burst into tears. My grandfather also muttered, I can't forgive this. A few days later, I left my son with my grandfather and decided to return to my in-laws' house with Derek to collect my belongings. I had left in a hurry without a word, so I thought it would cause trouble if there was any fuss. When we returned to my in-laws' house, my husband muttered with a cold gaze, You finally returned, huh? Derek calmly replied, My sister seems very distressed, so we'll be taking care of her for a while. We came today to collect some of her personal belongings. My husband retorted, I married her, so if she doesn't come back, there will be no one to do the chores. That's a big problem for me. My mother-in-law, looking down on Derek, said, I heard you do pottery. It must be a poor life, isn't it? Even if you take care of my daughter-in-law, it's going to be tough for you, right? Please send her back. It's a problem for us too. Derek clenched his fists tightly. I could see that he was desperately trying to suppress his anger. When we asked to take back our belongings, we were directed to a storage room in the corner of the hallway that served as my room. In the corner of the cramped room were cardboard boxes and old appliances carelessly placed. There were a few changes of clothes for me and my son, no heating appliances, just a thin blanket and a thin mattress. Derek was at a loss for words seeing the harsh conditions I was living under. When he glared at my mother-in-law, saying, Is this where you shoved my dear sister and her child? She retorted, She should be grateful just to have a room. She's just a housekeeper. I wanted to get out of that house as soon as possible, but I was worried about my father-in-law and wanted to see him. When I did, he quietly handed me something and apologized to Derek for not being able to protect me. For several days after that, we made preparations. Along with my grandfather and Derek, I headed to my in-laws' house. I was determined to fight for my son. I couldn't keep running away forever. When we arrived, I handed my husband the divorce papers. He was taken aback for a moment, but then declared he wouldn't pay alimony or child support since I was choosing to leave. I played a recording of his mother belittling me and him shouting at me. This is evidence of the abuse I suffered, I informed them. My husband and mother-in-law looked shocked, asking, When did you even record this? It turns out my father-in-law had secretly recorded everything to help me. He had discreetly passed the recording to me when I went to collect my things a few days before. Derek, who had graduated from law school and passed the bar exam while assisting our grandfather with his pottery work, said I could get a divorce since my husband was at fault. Derek had been actively practicing law to help those in need in our local community, and now he promised to fight for me wholeheartedly. My wheelchair-bound father-in-law showed up and handed the divorce papers to my mother-in-law. He had also recorded all the verbal abuse he had endured and was now ready to divorce as well. He preferred living in a care facility over living with my mother-in-law. Upon hearing this, my mother-in-law burst into laughter. I'll gladly divorce you and return to my brother's house and go back to my luxurious life, she said. At that moment, my grandfather made a call stating, I'll terminate any contracts with a family like this. It turns out the major department store run by my mother-in-law's brother was on the verge of bankruptcy. He had been eagerly trying to strike a deal to exhibit and sell my famous grandfather's pottery and was close to finalizing it. Immediately, a call came from her brother, the department store owner, severing ties. My mother-in-law blanched, muttering, "That's impossible," and sank to her knees. She finally seemed to understand her situation and started to beg. "Please forgive me. I was out of line. I have nowhere else to go. Please let me stay here, Lily. I'm sorry. Please forgive me." There was no way we could forgive her now. We all coldly stared at my weeping mother-in-law. However, just one person still didn't seem to fully grasp the situation. It was my husband. He said to me, "I'm set to inherit this hospital. If you want a divorce, I'll pay alimony and child support. I'll marry someone younger and prettier than you." But then my father-in-law said a single sentence: "The hospital has been sold." My husband's eyes widened in shock. What? In fact, Terry, requested by my father-in-law, had been pulling the strings. "Get out of here right now," my father-in-law screamed at his stepson. My husband's face turned white. He was not legally adopted by my father-in-law, who was actually his stepfather, so he had no legal claim on his stepfather's assets. On the contrary, I was legally adopted by my father-in-law, who had taken good care of me. Sensing the tide of events, my husband quickly changed his tune, pleading for a fresh start with me. I coldly dismissed him. Afterwards, my son and I were doted on and enjoyed life at my grandparents' house. He now cried less often and spent his time playing in nature, finding flowers and insects. My in-laws divorced. The audio tape proved crucial in establishing the fault of my mother-in-law. According to mutual acquaintances, my mother-in-law and husband are now living in a small rented apartment. Their attempts at finding new jobs had gone well, and they seem to be getting by on part-time work. Their days are filled with endless quarrels, each blaming the other for their current situation. My grandfather is living comfortably in a high-end senior home, and my son and I visit him often. Derek, as always, continues to work with pottery under my grandfather's guidance. My mother-in-law's brother, who wasn't at fault, held the pottery exhibition at a department store. At the exhibition, my brother met a lovely woman who was a fan of pottery, and they started dating. I expect we'll hear good news from him soon. I work as a nurse at a hospital near my grandfather's house. It was my dream to become a nurse like my mother, and now I find fulfillment in caring for my patients. Hey there, I'm Lisa, and I'm here to share a story about breaking free from old patterns and escaping the grip of a toxic relationship with my ex-husband, Jackson. This journey has been a roller coaster of ups and downs, but it ultimately led to self-discovery. I'm sharing my story for all the women, and even men, dealing with similar situations, hoping to inspire them to take a stand against what is wrong. Let me begin by telling you about Jackson, the man I once thought was my everything. We met in college, and he had that classic bad boy vibe that made me starry-eyed. Little did I know that beneath that magnetic exterior was a world of chaos. After graduation, he proposed, and I said yes. If I could go back in time, that's the moment I would change. Neither of us had a real job, and we were barely scraping by with low-paying gigs that could hardly cover rent for our tiny apartment. Back then, it felt like an adventure, but looking back, it was a big red flag. Jackson always claimed he loved me more than life itself, showering me with affection. But as time passed, I realized it wasn't love, not the healthy kind anyway. It was an obsession. He was insanely jealous and overbearingly possessive, qualities I initially mistook for protectiveness. Jackson had a knack for turning innocent situations into full-blown dramas. I lost count of the times he got jealous over people simply smiling at me. He even got mad at my cousins for being close to me. I convinced myself it was his way of showing love, but deep down, I knew something was wrong. Things escalated when he asked me to quit my job because he didn't like the guys I worked with. "Babe, I need to talk to you about something. I think you should quit your job." "What?" "Why, Jackson? Don't you trust me?" "It's not about trust, Lisa. It's those guys you work with. I don't trust them. You can't just hide me away from the world, Jackson." "I wish I could, babe. I just worry about you. It's not a safe world we live in. You don't get it. With my degree, I can get a better job, which means a better life for us. You know I have a degree too from the same college. I'm a bit slow right now, but I promise one day I'll provide everything you deserve. It's not about what you can provide. I never doubted your ability. I need to work on my career too. Independence is crucial these days. I just can't stand the thought of any guys getting close to you. It's your call now. It's either me or the job. I would choose you in a heartbeat." I couldn't believe I had been such a fool to leave my job just because he asked me to. At first, it seemed like he cared so much, taking care of our finances and everything. But it didn't take long for me to realize he wasn't just overprotective. He was controlling. He didn't want me to go out with friends, even for innocent nights out. He claimed he was worried about my safety, but in reality, he was more concerned about losing control. Then, a new problem arose. Jackson started getting into gambling. At first, it was just occasional poker nights with his buddies, but it quickly escalated. Soon, he was spending our hard-earned money at casinos and betting on sports events. When I tried to talk to him about it, he brushed off my concerns, saying it was just a way to relax and have some fun. But it wasn't fun anymore. His obsession with gambling took a toll on our finances. Bills piled up, and we struggled to make ends meet. Jackson, babe, we need to talk about your gambling. It's spiraling out of control and affecting both of us. What are you talking about, sweetie? I can handle it. It's just a bit of fun. Fun. Jackson, we're drowning in debt, and you've lost so much money lately. It's not fun anymore. It's an addiction. I can't believe you're accusing me like this. I know what I'm doing. Jackson, please, for me? Okay, maybe I'll try to cut down a bit. Just for you, love. One day, Jackson came home carrying something I could never have imagined in my wildest dreams, a stack of divorce papers. My heart sank as he handed them to me. Despite the challenges and struggles, I thought we were in this together. Jackson, why? We've been through so much together. We can work through whatever this is. Lisa, I don't know. It just felt like the right thing to do. We're not living the dream life we thought we would. Even though I love you, I can't keep going like this. It's over for me. We promised each other we would stick together no matter what. I know we made those promises, but things have changed. This is happening. You cannot stop it. I'll see you in court. After the courtroom procedures, our 3-year marriage ended just like that. I couldn't find closure in the vague excuse he gave for ending our marriage. The thought of reaching out to him one more time to rekindle the old flame was tempting. I couldn't bring myself to give up just yet. I decided to make up a reason to talk to him, claiming he had left some belongings at our old apartment. It was a silly excuse, but I needed to hear his voice to understand what had gone wrong. I dialed his number. The phone rang and rang, but Jackson did not pick up. I felt a pang of disappointment, but didn't give up. I left him a heartfelt voicemail, pouring out my feelings and asking him to call me back. Hours turned into days, and there was still no response. A week later, after countless attempts to reach him, I received a message from my phone provider. You cannot send messages to this conversation. I assumed he had blocked me, making it clear that he had moved on. It was one of the biggest mysteries of my life. Jackson, the man I thought would be by my side forever, had disappeared without a trace. What had gone wrong? Why had he given up on our marriage? Why had he walked away without a proper explanation? It was then that I knew I had no choice but to move forward. With my parents' financial support, I picked up the pieces of my life and started on a journey to rebuild myself. It wasn't a walk in the park, but I was determined to bounce back. I realized that to boost my career prospects, I needed to upgrade my skills. So, I dove into self-improvement, determined to add some impressive new bullet points to my resume. After a lot of hard work and personal growth, I landed a gig as a junior brand consultant at a fancy arts and antiques company. This was a big deal for me and a clear sign that my efforts were paying off. Little did I know that this job would lead to even greater things. Within a year, my commitment and hustle caught the attention of my bosses, and I was promoted to the main brand consultant. Finally, I could start securing my financial future. But wait, there's more to my story. I also met someone who would become very important in my life. His name was Joshua, and he's now my husband. Our paths crossed at the grocery store when he bumped into me. Hey, I've seen you somewhere. Are you Jackson's wife? Yeah, that's me, his ex-wife. I remember now. I once did some business with Jackson, and he got ridiculously hammered. You had to swoop in and save the day. Ah, that infamous night. It's a hilarious yet dark tale for sure. So, what happened between the two of you, if you don't mind me asking? I don't know myself. It's a long story. Well, can I have your number, and we can talk about it over coffee if you want? Sure, why not? Great, looking forward to hearing that story. After that casual coffee date with Joshua, we talked about the infamous night when Jackson. As I started sharing my side of the story, Joshua really listened. He wasn't just hearing me, he was genuinely listening. It felt liberating to have someone care enough to understand what I had been through. Joshua helped me see that Jackson was a textbook narcissist and that I had been stuck in a toxic and abusive situation for far too long. It was eye-opening. We kept meeting up, sometimes for a bite or just to hang out. Joshua treated me with respect, something I had almost forgotten. He patiently let me heal and grow, never pushing me to talk, but always being there when I needed to vent. Gradually, I started falling for him, not just because he had been a great listener when I needed to talk about my Jackson drama, but also because he was an amazing person, funny, kind, and down to earth. We had this connection that felt like it was meant to be. One day, as we were lounging in a park, he looked at me and said, "You deserve to be happy, Lisa. You deserve someone who loves you for who you are." That's when it hit me. He was talking about himself too. After 2 blissful years of dating, Joshua finally got down on one knee and asked me to marry him. You can imagine how over the moon happy I was. My parents were thrilled too, and it felt like the fresh start I had been waiting for. A man with stability, a fantastic personality, and a heart full of love. What more could a girl ask for? It was like the universe had aligned all my lucky stars in my favor. During those 2 years, everything was falling into place. I was excelling at work and living the dream life I had always imagined. Out of the blue, when I was riding high on this cloud of happiness, something came along to shake things up. It was one of those moments when you realize that life is not a straight line. The day after my wedding, on my first day back at work as Mrs. Lisa Baker, I noticed a cake on my desk. My first thought was that it was probably from one of my friends, a belated congratulations for the wedding or something. But as I opened the box, my heart sank. There, in big bold red letters, the cake spelled out CHETR. I quickly closed the box before anyone else could catch a glimpse of it. So there I was at my desk, wondering who had played such a sick prank on me, when my phone rang with an unknown number flashing on the screen. "Hey there, Jane. It's me, Jackson. I can't believe you're calling after all this time. Where have you been? This is unbelievable. Wait, did you send me the cake?" "Yeah, I did. Well, it's not a catch-up, to be honest. Consider it a loyalty test. I wanted to see if you would still pick up when I call you, for old time's sake." A loyalty test, I thought you would still be mine, and you just moved on. I was right after all. Look at you. I knew I could trust you. You belong to the streets. Jackson, are you hearing yourself? You're the one who divorced me without any reason, and now you're calling me names when I moved on. Oh, I heard about your little wedding that happened yesterday, Lisa. I hope I'm not disturbing you on your honeymoon. How on earth did you know? News travels fast, especially when your ex-wife is hooked up to your old business acquaintances. That doesn't give you the right to call me and complain. You made your decision, and I made mine. Lisa, you've always been a bit helpless, haven't you? I bet you couldn't pay your own bills. That's why you clung to that poor Joshua. I must say he has grown a pair too. Can't we just move past this? Just check your messages. I just sent you a picture. I couldn't believe it. Jackson had sent me a picture of his laptop screen displaying his bank account balance, showing a total of $300,000. Where did all this money come from? Gambling, among other things. Turns out you were the one holding me back all along. You didn't stay loyal, did you? Remarried an old friend, eh? You always were a bit of a loser, and you weren't doing so well financially. I assume that's why you married Joshua, right? Some things never change. You will always be the same, Lisa, forever struggling and needing help. Well, have fun staying poor. You know what, Jackson? I don't need this. Don't you ever try to contact me again. You are just history to me now. Bye. Be careful choosing your words, Lisa. I slammed the phone down on Jackson. What was he even going on about? A loyalty test. It felt like he had been treating my life as some sort of joke for the past 3 years. It was becoming increasingly clear that he had always been a narcissist, but it had taken me this long to see it. Strangely, I didn't mention the encounter with Jackson to Joshua. We had just celebrated our wedding day, and I didn't want to spoil our happiness. After that creepy Jackson encounter, I started feeling unsafe, as if he might want to harm me. But I kept it to myself and eventually pushed it aside, hoping it would fade away. Then 6 months later, something totally nuts happened. One quiet Sunday night, Joshua and I were chilling at home, watching a movie. Suddenly, the doorbell rang, and I answered it cautiously. Guess who it was? A sloshed Jackson, smelling like a brewery. I was shocked and scared. Why was he here and what was he up to? Joshua stepped in, all protective, but we were both baffled and uneasy. I need to talk to Jane. Jackson, you're drunk. Go away. We do not want you here. Not now, not ever. Please just let me. Jackson, please just go, buddy. She's not your wife anymore. I need to talk to her. Jackson, leave now, or I might have to call the cops. I admit that a part of me was worried about Jackson. His life had taken a nosedive, and it did stir up a tad bit of concern. But let's be real, it was not my problem anymore. After everything he had put me through, all I had for him was pure hatred. Once Jackson was gone, I decided to open up to Joshua about the phone call. It was a difficult conversation, but Joshua proved to be my rock. He had my back, no questions asked. He made me feel safe, assuring me there was nothing to fear. The next day, Joshua was at work and I found myself alone at home. My phone rang, and it was Jackson calling again. What's the deal, Jackson? Why are you calling me now? Lisa, I need to apologize for everything I put you through. An apology after all these years? What brought this on? I always believed no amount of therapy could ever fix you because you're so messed up. Lisa, I'm in a tough spot. I need some financial help. I know you might not have much, but… Financial help? I knew this wasn't so innocent. Calling me poor, remember? You always thought I lacked potential and control over my life. That's why you tried to manipulate me. But you know what, Jackson? Check your messages. I hung up on Jackson, then sent him a picture of my bank balance, $600,000, double what he had in his account a while back. Jackson called me up again, this time crying. Lisa, darling, I'm genuinely sorry for mistreating you and trying to control you. Where did you get all this money from? Stop crying in front of me, it's pathetic. Where I got my money is simple. I earned it. I'm a brand consultant now. Oh my God, Lisa, can you please help me? I've lost everything to gambling. I can't afford a place to stay. I beg you, honey, this could be a game changer for me. Funny how the tables turn, isn't it? Look at you now, almost homeless with a gambling addiction and a narcissistic personality. No family, no friends, nothing. Meanwhile, here I am with a great job, a loving husband, and a happy home. Who's the problematic one now, you toxic piece of trash? Lisa, please, I'm in real trouble here. I need help. No more chances, Jackson. How can you even think I would help you after all you did? This is it. One more call, and I'm taking serious action against you. Lisa, please, just wait. We're done for good, Jackson. It's been a month since that call with Jackson, and it's safe to say he's been nowhere in sight. Back when I was with Jackson, I thought love was this intense, burning, red kind of thing. He had me convinced that it had to be all fiery and passionate. But you know what? Now, with Joshua, I've learned that love is not like that at all. Real love is more like a warm, steady, golden glow. It's not about drama or control. It's about support and lifting each other up. But I can't help but think about all the men and women out there going through similar situations, stuck in a toxic cycle with their exes. I want to tell them this: break free from that pattern. Your ex might make you feel worthless and convince you there is nothing better out there for you, but let me be clear. There is. You deserve all the happiness, love, and success in the world. Just like I found it, you can too. It's not easy and it takes time, but you're worth it. Do not let anyone drag you down or make you doubt yourself. The president of the company passed away, and his funeral is the day after tomorrow. I received the sudden news 2 days ago from my boss at the head office, the same one who had relegated me. Needless to say, you must come to the funeral, he insisted, making sure I would attend. As expected, any employee would go to the funeral of the president of their company, but I was fed up with my boss's attitude as usual. Today, I left the suburban branch office where I had been relegated and arrived at the nearest train station to head to the funeral home. It looked like I would get there on time. As I was about to walk through the ticket gate, I saw a woman pushing a wheelchair, struggling at the ticket counter. She seemed to be seeking help from the station attendant, who appeared uncomfortable. Watching closely, I noticed the woman looked like a foreigner, and the girl in the wheelchair, probably of elementary school age, also looked foreign. I wondered if they were mother and daughter. Curious, I casually walked towards them. They were speaking Vietnamese. In fact, I had majored in Vietnamese as a second language in college. Even though it was my second foreign language, I had taken all the classes and even obtained a certificate. I also had experience working as a hall staff member at a Vietnamese restaurant, so thanks to a life surrounded by native Vietnamese speakers, my Vietnamese speaking ability was fairly good. With this background, I decided to talk to her in Vietnamese if she was in trouble. "Can I help you with something?" I asked. She looked surprised for a moment but immediately replied in Vietnamese, "Oh, can you speak Vietnamese?" I nodded, a little relieved that she understood. "Yes, I do. I studied at university. I can speak a little. I thought you might need some help." Her eyes lit up. "Thank you, you were so kind. Actually, I was having trouble figuring out how to buy a ticket. I tried to ask the station attendant, but he couldn't understand me at all. Since I can barely speak English, I didn't know what to do. Thank goodness there is a kind person like you. Could you please tell me how to buy a ticket?" "Oh, I see. That must have been hard. Of course, it's no problem. I'll show you at the ticket counter." I showed her how to buy the ticket and we went through the ticket gate together. "Thank you so much. You were very helpful," they said, looking totally relieved. I was very glad that I could use what I'd learned to help others. No, not at all. "There's an elevator right there you can use," I said, pointing it out, but then realized, oh my, unfortunately, the elevator is out of order. "Oh dear, it looks like it's out of order," I noted. Hearing that, she became terribly upset. "Oh no, what am I going to do? I have something very important to do today." Her face, which had just brightened up, became gloomy again. I couldn't decide right away if I should carry the wheelchair up the stairs. Depending on the weight, it could take a long time, and I might not make it to the president's funeral in time. I thought about asking the station attendant for help by translating, but when I glanced at him, he was obviously avoiding eye contact with me. I didn't want to rely on those guys. "Okay, I gotta do it," I thought. I didn't want to come this far and just abandon them. I made up my mind. "If you want, I can carry your wheelchair up the stairs. Can you carry your daughter on your back?" "Yes, I can. Thank you," she replied happily. She picked up her daughter from the wheelchair, and I folded it up and carried it. It was quite heavy. Was it made in a foreign country or domestically? I had never carried wheelchairs before in my life, so I couldn't compare. I managed to carry it up the stairs. "Are you all right?" she repeatedly asked, even though she was also carrying her child on her back. "I'm fine. I think she is heavier than the wheelchair, isn't she?" I pretended to be calm and climbed the stairs. "I'm fine. I'm used to carrying my daughter on my back," she smiled. We reached the landing in the middle of the stairs and decided to rest there. "I'm sorry it's too late to ask you, but weren't you on your way somewhere? I thought you might be in a hurry." Yes, actually I'm in kind of a hurry." For a moment, I remembered my boss's face and answered with a smile. She suddenly realized, "Oh no, don't worry about us, you just go ahead." She said that, but there was no way I was leaving them in the middle of the stairs like this. There was absolutely no way she could carry this heavy wheelchair up by herself. "No, it's okay. You're more important. Let me help you to the end," I insisted. I checked my watch. I could still make it to the funeral just in time. After a short break to regain some strength, I climbed the rest of the stairs, little by little. "Hang in there, mister. Thank you." Her daughter cheered me on. Finally, we made it to the top. "We made it. We made it," I exclaimed. "I'm so glad. Thank you so much for your help." Thank you," she said, and the three of us shared the joy of reaching the platform. At that moment, we heard an announcement from the station. "The train will be leaving soon." Oh no, I reflexively tried to run to catch the train, but the doors closed and it left. "Oh my God," I muttered. Without that train, I would miss the president's funeral and be late. "I'm sorry, it's my fault you missed the train," she said, apologizing profusely. I didn't want to make them feel worse than they already did. "It's going to be all right. I'll figure something out," I replied, smiling to reassure her. While waiting for the next train, I called my boss, but he didn't answer. He was probably busy. I was anxious and impatient, but also a little relieved. I put her daughter back in the wheelchair and finished my task. As we sat on the bench, I decided to ask the question that had been on my mind. "Do you two live here?" "Actually, got married and just moved here, but things have been a bit," she trailed off, not wanting to elaborate. "It's okay, you don't have to talk if you don't want to. I'm sorry for asking a private question." I quickly apologized. In the meantime, time was passing. The next train was in 15 minutes. I looked at the timetable and sighed involuntarily. The thought of my boss being angry with me again was depressing, partly because I would be late for the president's funeral, but also because I didn't want to see him after a while. Is it possible that there's something else bothering you besides being late? She asked, startling me with her insight. Normally, I wouldn't talk to a stranger about my private life, but I felt less tense and decided to speak little by little. Actually, I had an irrational thing happen to me at work, and I was transferred to a branch office near here. I had a stable job at the head office, I said. I'm sorry, that's very sad, she replied. I know this is not the kind of thing to tell someone you just met, but my boss puts all the blame on me, and that's how I ended up where I am now. Today, I have to face that boss, and that's why I was feeling a little depressed, I continued. I'm sorry to tell you this story that you may not want to hear, but I haven't had anyone to talk to about it until now. It's okay, you saved us. Let me at least listen to your story, she said with a sympathetic smile. I'm kind of embarrassed. I've never complained about work to anyone before, I admitted. I found myself talking about something I had been holding inside for a long time. I guess I wanted someone to listen. I was surprised that I couldn't stop talking. My boss didn't like me, so he intentionally did wrong things and put all the blame on me. He deliberately pissed off the president, telling him that I was to blame, so I was relegated to the suburban office. I was just about to build my career at the head office, I explained. I see. Thank you for telling me what you're going through. I wish I could help you, but sorry, I can't do anything, she mumbled sadly. No, don't worry, just think of it as one office worker's rant. I feel better just talking to someone, I said. I felt bad that I had burdened her. Trying to change the subject to something more cheerful, I said, actually, I have a dream. I want to make frozen foods for foreigners. Something authentic, something that would remind them of their homeland while living in this country. But that's not possible at the branch office where I am now. Food development can only be done at the head office. That's why I want to go back to the head office someday and make my dream come true. That's wonderful, that's wonderful. I'll support your dream, she said. While we were talking, the train arrived. I helped them get on, and coincidentally, we got off at the same station 2 stops away. Thank you for listening to my story. Now, excuse me, but I must hurry, I said, rushing towards the ticket gates. Thank you very much, thank you. They waved their hands and thanked me in English. When I arrived at the site, the funeral was nearly over. My boss was glaring at me while the priest was praying. I had messed up. My head hurt just thinking about what would happen next. I was trembling during the entire ceremony. Right after the ceremony ended and the coffin was placed in the hearse, my boss approached me. Hey, I have something to tell you. I need to talk to you. Yes, I replied. He took me to a private room, and the moment the door closed, he started yelling at me. Who do you think you are, you blinking fool? What are you doing showing up late for the president's funeral? I'm sorry. I was helping some foreigners at the train station, and I got delayed. I tried to explain. Helping people and foreigners is none of your business. Just leave such foreigners alone. He yelled so loudly that people outside the room could hear. The managing director and other employees rushed to the scene. What's going on here? The managing director asked. I thought it was inappropriate for him to be late for a funeral, so I scolded him, my boss said. I see. Being late is not good. So why were you late? The managing director asked me. Well, he said he was helping a foreigner, and I told him to leave that kind of thing alone. My boss interrupted. Just then, a young man who had been listening at the back of the crowd stepped forward. Wait a minute. What did you just say? The boss glared at the resolute young man. What is it suddenly? Excuse me, who are you? I am the son of the president of this company. It was my father's funeral today. I haven't been back in Japan for a long time, so you probably don't know who I am yet. I have decided to take over the company, he announced. Everyone looked surprised at the same time. I heard you speaking very loudly, so I had to listen to what you were saying. You seem to be blaming him for helping foreigners. I don't think that's a good thing. No, that's not what I meant. I was just warning him about being late for the funeral. My boss started to panic. I don't agree with blaming him because my wife is Vietnamese and she was saved by him, the president's son said, bringing forward the Vietnamese woman I had just met at the station. I was utterly shocked. I did not expect that she was the president's daughter-in-law. Our daughter has trouble with her legs, so she is in a wheelchair. When the two of them tried to take the train today, they didn't know how to buy a ticket. They tried to ask the station attendant but couldn't communicate because she can't speak English well. When they were both at a complete loss, he, who speaks Vietnamese, helped them buy a ticket. In addition, he willingly carried the wheelchair up the long stairs. He even helped them get on the train, even though he was in a hurry. That's what my wife told me. My wife, my daughter, and I are very grateful to him. It is outrageous to scold him for that, he said firmly. My boss shuddered. No, I didn't know that. I'm sorry, he stammered. The atmosphere was tense, but I felt a sense of relief knowing that my actions were understood and appreciated by someone who mattered. The next president was furious. Not only were you very rude to foreigners, but you also have the nerve to show up late for the funeral. Our company is planning to make more products for the international market. It's troubling to have people like you here. I don't think our company needs you. Oh no, please don't say that. My boss pleaded desperately. But no matter how much he begged, it didn't make any difference. I heard that you even cheated and blamed him, then kicked him out of the head office. You were fired. This can't be happening, my boss stammered, unable to accept what just happened. The next president gave my boss a cold look as he shook, then turned to me with kindness. Thank you for saving my wife and daughter. I was supposed to drive them here, but I had to leave early, so they had to take the train. My wife also told me why you were moved to the branch office. I can't allow such things to happen. When I become president, I will make sure the company values its employees' true abilities. He spoke passionately, then added, by the way, I heard you speak Vietnamese. If you're willing, I'd like you to develop food products for foreigners at the head office. I was extremely surprised. Are you sure? Of course I'm sure. We need talented people like you to develop our products. A dream I had almost given up on was coming true. I was so happy and surprised that I found myself in tears. When the new president took over, I returned to the head office, where I had longed to work. I was finally able to focus on developing food products for foreigners. We created authentic bibimbap for Koreans, hot pot sets for Chinese, and koshari for Egyptians, among others. There were many failures at first, such as difficulties in properly defrosting large products. However, through the team's concerted efforts and repeated trial and error, we successfully commercialized the products. Once we started selling, the products became big hits, one after another. Our company's sales steadily rose. I'm so glad we entrusted you with this project, the president said, very pleased. Recognized for my achievements, I was promoted. Since that incident, I have become good friends with the president's wife and daughter, and they often took me out to dinner. I met her friend at a gathering later, and eventually, I married her. She was also Vietnamese, making ours an international marriage. Looking back, it felt like a strange twist of fate, but I was glad I took the plunge back then. Holding my baby, I resolved to do my best to make my wife and child happy. That is why I continue to work hard on product development. You're the candidate for the next president, the president once said at a company party, quite drunk. I knew he was joking, but those words made me happy. No one else had ever been told anything similar, so I wondered if it was somehow special. I hope so, and I'm secretly encouraged by it. For the sake of the president who cares about me, and for the company, I want to continue making products that will be loved by many people. When I met Nancy's father to formally introduce myself for marriage, he looked down on me and suddenly started yelling. You're a high school graduate, I hear. I won't let my daughter marry a high school graduate. Although I was somewhat prepared, it was still harsh to hear. I thought, what an unfortunate girl Nancy is. At the same time, I wanted to rescue her somehow. Hey, you high school dropout, get out of here right now, he continued. Understood, I'll leave, I said, and then called my secretary on the phone. After a while, my secretary entered the room. Who are you? Nancy's father asked. I am Michael, and I turned 62 this year. Unfortunately, I'm still single. It's not that I was never interested in marriage. There were women I thought about marrying in the past, but we never made it to getting married and eventually broke up. Each time, I would dive back into my work, and before I knew it, I had reached this age. To be honest, now I'm more concerned about finishing up my time at the company rather than getting married. The company I'm currently with is performing quite poorly. Identifying the causes of the decline and turning things around is what I consider my final job. I joined this company 2 months ago, and I have finally gotten used to it. But the atmosphere of the company is pretty bad. Good morning. Oh, good morning. Her name is Nancy. She works in accounting at the company, and she's been helping me figure out solutions to the poor performance. She must be 32 this year. To me, she's like a daughter, very serious and incredibly helpful. Lately, I can't stop thinking about her. Sometimes she looks incredibly troubled. What's wrong? Is something the matter? I asked her. Oh yeah, I'm fine, she replied. You can always talk to me about anything. Thank you. We always have these kinds of exchanges. A few days later, I had to go to another department, and it was late when I returned to accounting. Everyone had left, and the office was empty except for Nancy, who was still there. What? Still working? Asterisk, sniff. Asterisk, when I looked, I saw that Nancy was crying. I'm sorry, what's wrong? Well, I might not be much help, but talking about it could make you feel better. Won't you tell me what's going on? I shouldn't trouble you with this. Don't worry about it. It's the least I can do for all the help you've given me at work. With that, Nancy finally opened up. I'm sorry to worry you. Sometimes I wonder what I'm living for. I'm scared to go home. Did something happen at home? When I said that, she began to speak quietly. Her parents were what you'd call toxic. It seems like her entire salary from this job is being siphoned off by her parents, especially Nancy's mother, who seemed quite greedy about money. This month's paycheck is too small, isn't it? That's all of it. You could increase it by working overtime, right? Children are supposed to make their parents' lives easier. This amount won't ease anything. You're really useless. On payday, she was typically told things like this, and her entire paycheck was taken away. And the president of this company is my father. What? I had yet to meet the president. I think my father only sees me as a tool of his own. According to her, Nancy's father likes to dominate, and even at 32, he checks her cell phone every day. Since the parents pay for the cell phone, they feel it's only natural they have the right to check it. Hand it over now. If she refuses to hand over the phone, if you don't hand it over, I'll cut off your phone, he threatens. Since Nancy's salary is entirely taken by her mother, she couldn't possibly pay the cell phone bill herself. He checks all her contacts in the phone, and if any man's names are saved, they are immediately deleted in a tyrannical fashion. If she comes home late, she's interrogated about where she was, who she was with, and what she was doing. It seems Nancy's father wants to keep her tied to the house. He wants her within his sight and making his life easier. Hearing this, I understood why she was so considerate. It made strange sense to me. I also began to understand why her father had her working in his company. If she's within sight, any man approaching her could be immediately deterred. Then why hasn't he said anything to me? Is it because of my age? Am I not considered a threat? Does he even realize I work at this company? All these questions started floating in my mind. Meanwhile, Nancy continued speaking. I don't have any freedom. It seems like I've always had to live for my parents. Has it always been like this since you were little? Yes, always. It seems this wasn't something that just started recently. Useless. I don't need you anymore. I'll throw you away. From a young age, Nancy was raised hearing things like this. Because of that, she did the household chores instead of her mother to feel needed. Nancy's mother can't do housework, and when Nancy tries to clean up, is that some kind of sarcasm? Nancy's mother would start raging if she stopped cleaning, and she'd be scolded for that too. As a child, she was troubled about what to do when her mother was in a bad mood. Her mother just wanted to yell, talking endlessly when angry and not listening to anything Nancy had to say. If Nancy ever tried to voice her opinion, it would set her mother off. Nancy had to keep saying yes until her mother was satisfied. I was a child, so I didn't know about the term toxic parents. I took everything my parents said as absolute, believing that everything that happened was my fault. I thought about leaving this world many times. How can I get some relief? If I were to leave this world, would anyone be sad? Even now, she finds herself thinking these thoughts. The painful expression she sometimes showed me now made sense. I see, it's been tough, huh? And still is, Nancy replied, a bit teary-eyed. I do have a dream, even someone like me. What kind of dream? It's been my dream since elementary school to live on my own, to live alone. You're thinking, is that all? Well, yeah. My parents see me as nothing more than a maid, a cash cow. I want to get away from such people. I want my own time. Is it wrong for me to feel this way? Not at all. And I think it'll come true soon. What? Hearing Nancy's story made me think about how unfortunate she was. At the same time, I wanted to somehow rescue her. You'll need to be ready to leave your parents, but can you do that? If you stay with your parents, Nancy, you'll be ruined. I have a plan. As I listened to Nancy, I explained the plan I had thought of. Really? Can I do that? Nancy seemed quite surprised by my plan. Yes, my plan was for us to pretend to get married so you could leave your home. They'll find out it's a lie soon enough. That's okay, it's after you cut ties with your parents. Given my age, Nancy's parents will definitely oppose it. If they oppose, you can just say you're cutting parental ties and leave. But I actually only have a high school diploma. My parents thought it wasteful to spend money on university, so they didn't let me go. What company would hire someone with just a high school diploma? Don't worry about that. I'm a high school graduate too, and there are plenty of companies that would hire someone like you, Nancy. I guarantee it. I had been working with Nancy for about 2 months. Seeing her work, it's hard to believe she learned accounting on her own. I was convinced she was a valuable asset. A few days later, the day came to meet Nancy's parents. Nancy had been worried ever since. It's up to you, Nancy. If you're really ready to cut ties with your parents, you'll be fine, I kept reassuring her. Entering Nancy's house, I greeted her parents. Both of Nancy's parents had a brash demeanor, nothing like Nancy. What brings you here today? Her father asked. Yes, I'm considering marrying Nancy. Don't joke with me. As soon as I said that, he began to yell. I've heard about you. You're a high school graduate, I hear. I won't let my daughter marry a high school graduate. Apparently, Nancy had told her father. That was exactly what I had anticipated. Nancy, you're being deceived by this high school dropout, aren't you? And how old are you? I'll be 62 this year. 62? Absolutely not. There's no way I can approve of a 62-year-old high school graduate. You must not be good for much anyway. What's good about a poor-looking man like that? I was somewhat prepared, but it was still harsh to hear. If you won't approve of the marriage, then we'll have to sever our family ties. Nancy, I won't allow you to leave home. You the high school dropout. Get out of here. Understood. I'm leaving, and I'm taking Nancy with me. Saying that, I called my secretary on the phone. After a while, the secretary came in. Who are you? President, are you back? Oh, President, there's no way this poor-looking high school dropout could be a president. Which company is this? Watch your mouth. Who do you think you're speaking to? It's unbelievable, but you don't know, do you? If you don't know, let me enlighten you. This man is the president of your parent company. There is no room for rudeness. I can understand why they wouldn't recognize me. After all, I only became the president 3 months ago. That's enough. I'm sorry, but could you help Nancy with her luggage? Even the president can be too subtle. You should have just told them straight, Nancy said. So, I'll be taking Nancy with me. Nancy's parents were frozen by the secretary's words. I had forgotten to tell Nancy as well, so she seemed quite surprised. Oh right, your company's performance has been so poor that I had to conduct an internal investigation. I'll decide what to do about it soon. What do you mean, decide what to do? Exactly what I said. What will happen to me? Are you more concerned about yourself than the company and your employees? From what I've seen, you have excellent employees, which surprised me. Despite that, there's no growth in performance. I've concluded that it's because you are too autocratic. You understand what I'm saying, right? Be prepared. That's ridiculous. You? What are you going to do? I don't want this. Can we do something about it? Do something like what? Maybe find a position at a related company? I can't do that as a high school dropout. Where's that energy you had just a moment ago? If you had the power you were showing while yelling at me, you could make it anywhere. But please, somehow, it's always about you, isn't it? I'm at a loss for words. I'm going back. If you need me, I'll be at the office. With that, I tried to leave Nancy's house in a panic. Nancy's mother came out. Nancy, what about your mother? Are you leaving me too? Have you forgotten all I've done to raise you, you ungrateful child? Just let me be free for once. Haven't I always done as you asked until now? Don't bother me anymore. What about the money? You'll send money home, right? I later learned that although Nancy had been handing over her entire paycheck, she had been given a small allowance. This allowance was barely enough to cover her basic personal needs. I've been giving you money faithfully every month, haven't I? Take care of your own living expenses. Isn't it natural for children to take care of their parents? You're abandoning that responsibility. Yes, that's why I'm saying I'm cutting ties. How am I supposed to live now? It seemed Nancy's parents had always lived selfishly. As long as they were comfortable and secure, that was all that mattered. Nancy was never included in their comfort. They never got involved in anything inconvenient or troublesome. All these inconveniences and troubles had been pushed onto Nancy. That's what led to this situation. I thought that these toxic parents would only be a hindrance to Nancy's future. A parent shouldn't be allowed to crush their child's future. I had told Nancy to be firm and clear in her convictions. From the conversations I've heard, Nancy's resolve seemed firm. Goodbye. I don't expect we'll ever meet again, so take care. With that, Nancy conveyed her message to her mother and came towards the car where we were waiting. It was the moment Nancy truly became free. Thank you so much. I feel incredibly relieved. Any regrets? None at all. It was the first time I had seen Nancy smile like that. I felt it was worth enduring the harsh things Nancy's parents had said to me. Even I was hurt by being spoken to like that. Afterward, we headed to the apartment where Nancy would be living. I had already arranged a lease for Nancy's apartment beforehand. I had also prepared a new job for her. Really, thank you for everything. But I was surprised to learn that you, Michael, are the president of the parent company. I wasn't hiding it. There just wasn't a need to bring it up. From now on, you walk your own path in life. If you have troubles, I'm here to help. Saying this, I parted ways with Nancy. A few days later, Nancy's father came to the office. I apologized for my behavior the other day. You can do whatever you like with that girl. Please don't give up on our company, he said. His attitude significantly changed from before. Doesn't he care about his own daughter? I thought about asking, but I refrained. Don't worry about your daughter. I'll support Nancy so she can live the life she desires. But as for the company, I informed Nancy's father that he would have to resign as president. In return, I promised to continue the business by covering the deficits. How about that? This way, the company can be saved and employees can be retained. That's good, isn't it? That is. Nancy's father's complexion rapidly changed. Oh, what's the matter? I have worked tirelessly for the company. I cannot accept this outcome. I thought you might say that. Did you think I knew nothing during my internal investigations at the subsidiary? I visited various departments and heard stories about the president. It seems you've been treating the company as your own personal property. The employees aren't here just for you. Even if I were you, I'd make the same decision. Nancy's father sank to his knees. What will you do? It might be best to comply gracefully. Abandoned by your daughter, haven't you reflected a bit? Stop looking down on people and using them. Nancy's father was completely dejected, but it didn't end there. He was also under suspicion for embezzlement. He must have been hoarding quite a sum for himself. How long he had been embezzling money would soon be discovered. He probably didn't want to lose his position, enjoying the perks as long as he could. But such times cannot last forever. A few weeks later, Nancy's father was taken away by the police. I believe the police will uncover everything and he will never be able to return to his former life. After having made so many people suffer, he must face the consequences. As for Nancy's mother, she disappeared around the same time her husband was taken by the police. Perhaps she realized she could no longer siphon money from her husband or daughter. I wondered if Nancy's mother might be holding on to the embezzled funds, but I decided to leave everything to the police. Just when everything seemed to have settled, one troubling thing occurred. When I returned home, Nancy was waiting at my doorstep. Welcome back. What? You came again? Haven't you had dinner yet? I came to cook. Honestly, I appreciate it, but I'm concerned about what the neighbors might think with such a young woman frequently entering my house. But you said you'd marry me, didn't you? No, that was just a lie to get you out of that situation. What? That's terrible. You played with my feelings. It felt like I was being completely toyed with. Aren't I too old for you? That doesn't matter. She didn't seem to care at all about what I was saying. I couldn't tell anymore what was serious and what was a joke. Lately, she's been coming over almost every day. After a few months, there I was, living with Nancy. I had given in to her insistence. Isn't there someone more suitable for you? I found myself saying things that sounded like a father. Please don't ever say that again. She would get angry when I said that. You finally have your freedom. You should enjoy your life. I am enjoying my life. Being with you, Michael, is my choice, she said and continued to take care of me diligently. Does it bother you? No, not really. I am actually quite grateful. But I want you to use your time for yourself. It is for myself. I want you to need me, Michael. Being with you, I feel at peace. When I'm with Nancy, people often think we're father and daughter. Perhaps sensing how I felt, Nancy said, You worry too much about what others think. The world isn't going to make us happy, right? I've decided to seize my own happiness. Honestly, I'm perplexed by Nancy, but I think it's not too bad. I guess this must be happiness, as I'm beginning to feel it.